Everyone, my name is Mikayla, and me and my partner Aubrey will be presenting the U.S. Supreme Court case of Espinoza versus Montana Department of Revenue from 2020. This case focused on the question of whether private schools could be excluded from public scholarship programs without violating the First Amendment right of our Constitution. So let's dive in and see who this case involved. This case involved two primary parties, Kendra Espinoza, who was a mother whose children attended Stillwater Christian School, and the Montana Department of Revenue, which established a Rule 1. So there was three mothers whose children attended Stillwater Christian who were also involved with Kendra Espinoza, and they were affected by Montana's Rule 1. Montana's Rule 1 objected the Montana legislature scholarship program that aided students who attended private schools, and this raised many issues. So although two other families qualified for the scholarships, Rule 1 blocked their qualification. And this is where we can see the legal issues that will arise in this case. So let's look at the overview of this case. So as I said, in 2020, the Montana legislature established a scholarship program which would aid parents to help afford a private education for their children. Private education is very expensive, personal experience. I attended private school, I still attend a private school, and it's very expensive. And the average income of parents who sent their kids to Stillwater Christian specifically was about 30 to 50, which anyone knows that's not a lot, and it's hard to send your kids to private school if that's all you were making. So this program was designed to grant a tax credit to those who donated to certain organizations, mainly religious ones, which would provide scholarships to students attending the schools that qualified. Stillwater Christian was a school that qualified. However, the Rule 1 struck that down, and the Montana Supreme Court struck that down and said that you cannot grant scholarships to religious schools, which this raised our freedom of religion, and this went against everything that our Constitution says. So the mothers believed. So let's look at the legal issues that arose out of this case. The main legal issue was the free exercise clause. This clause says that it protects religious observers against the unequal treatment and against laws that impose special disabilities on the basis of religion. So the Montana legislature stated that neither the scholarship organization nor its donors can restrict awards to particular types of school, meaning that they can't choose where their money is going in a sense. So they can't say, I'll donate and I'll give my tax credit, or I'll get a tax credit for donating, but my money's not allowed to go fund private education, specifically religious education, because that discriminates against religious freedom. However, Rule 1 said that it objected their program, and it said that you guys can't we can't government fund private education. So in other words, students who attended public schools could benefit from scholarships, but if you're a student attending private schools, you can't benefit at all. So this issue, it discriminated against religious freedom, as I said, which left families with the hard decision of where do we send our kids, because we want to send our kids where we feel comfortable, where our religious values align with those that we're teaching at home, and Stillwater seemed like the perfect school. So in December 2018, the Montana Supreme Court reversed the trial, and there was another local private school called Big Sky, which benefited from the scholarships, which was the same as Stillwater. They both met the statutory requirements that were established to benefit, but after they reversed the trial and the Supreme Court shut down that Rule 1, they argued that because they shut it down and they shut the case, they had no mechanism in preventing scholarships to go to religious schools. However, this was not a good argument, because you can't shut down a program and think that it's going to erase everything, although you already said that this program is restricting private education. So this raised the question did the free exercise clause of the U.S. Constitution prohibit that application of the no aid provision? So in the corner in the picture, we see the First Amendment of the Constitution, which states our religious freedom and establishes that we can't discriminate that. So now Aubrey will get into the court's decision, how this might go against the biblical point of view. As we attend a private school, it's important to see the biblical view of this case and our opinion in this case. Thank you.
Oh, my name is Aubrey and I will be going over the court's decision on this case. I'll be shedding light on a biblical perspective on this case, and I will be telling you about our personal opinions on the case. But first, I would just like to do a quick recap on what the issue is that the court was deciding against. Obviously, Mikayla did a wonderful job explaining the issue. I'm doing a very quick summarized recap. The main issue and question on the table was, can Montana deny religious schools a state-funded scholarship program simply because they are religious schools? Montana state constitution contained a clause called the No Aid Clause, which did not allow funding to religious institutions by the state. Tax credits funded the scholarship program and gave families the option of the private schools they would like to send their kids to. Now, this first went to the Montana Supreme Court. The Montana Supreme Court ruled that the scholarship program was unconstitutional. They argued that since the program covered religious schools, it did not comply with the no aid requirement in their state constitution. This was then submitted to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court overturned the Montana Supreme Court ruling in a 5-4 decision. The Supreme Court believed that Montana cannot leave out schools just because of their religion. The decision highlighted the fact that religion should not be used as an excuse to deprive someone from a governmental benefit. Obviously, I just went through a lot of reasoning, but here's a little bit more. The court based its decision on the Free Exercise Clause, which is founded in our American Constitution. Very important. The provision fights against religious discrimination. The state was penalizing families who wanted a religious education by refusing them a scholarship system that is otherwise provided to all other types of private schools. This had a major impact, but here are 3 main ones. First, the religious schools and families are not able to take part in a public benefit program without being discriminated against because of religion. Second, states are not able to exploit the constitutions to block the access of the religious institutions to generally available public benefits. And third, the case confirms the fact that public programs should be neutral in terms of religion. They can neither give preference to religious institutions nor discriminate against them just because of their religious nature, which is awesome. Now let's get into some biblical support. Obviously, the main issue on the table was about religion. Of course, we would like to be in support of that. We love religion. The Supreme Court decided to protect the right of religious schools and families to participate in public benefit programs without discrimination. This obviously aligns with the Bible and promotes freely worshiping and serving God. Second, let's talk about the fairness and equality of the decision. This decision promoted fairness by ensuring parents who choose faith-based schools and they are not excluded from educational support. This reflects biblical justice and equality, specifically found in Proverbs 31, 8-9, which says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and needy." Just a Bible verse reinforcing the idea of fairness and justice, specifically in the religious context. Third, stewardship and accountability. This case raises questions about how faith-based schools should manage public resources responsibly and maintain integrity when receiving government support. This is very important and just a relatable, real application. And lastly, the Christian mission and witness. Religious schools must preserve their spiritual mission and values even when engaging in public programs. Romans 12:2 reminds believers to stay distinct and faithful while influencing society for good. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is for your life, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." And lastly, what is our personal opinion on this case? Well, we agree with this course case because of 4 reasons as well. They're all very similar. I feel like I could keep repeating myself, but this is all important things. First, there is the protection of religious freedom. The Supreme Court affirmed that religious schools cannot be excluded from public benefit programs solely because of their religious character, which is very important, especially to us because this is a private Christian school. So those are like our people. This protects the constitutional right of individuals and institutions to practice their faith freely, which is a very big deal and something that we don't want to let go of easily, which aligns with biblical principles of liberty in Christ, as I stated previously. Second, it supports faith-based schools. Religious schools that serve communities can now participate in public programs, helping them continue their mission of spiritual and academic formation. This is very important. Obviously, Christian education is something that is very unique and very important, and cannot just be let go of so easily. And if people need extra help and support to pursue the goal of Christian education, then they should be able to just as much as anybody else. Third, this encourages educational choice. The Montana ruling strengthened school choice initiative, allowing more families to choose the type of education that aligns with their beliefs and values. If the U.S. Supreme Court hadn't overturned Montana's initial ruling, then a lot of people would have lost the ability to send the kids or to send themselves to these private Christian institutes because they didn't have the funding for it. And that's very important to us and should be to everyone. And lastly, legal clarity and precedent. This decision set a very clear precedent that states cannot discriminate against religious institutions in general. This is very important too. Obviously, if we even start to inch over the line of discriminating against religious schooling, then that could just leave a lot of leeway for further problems down the road, which is not good. So it's good that the U.S. Supreme Court caught them in just those minor issues so that they wouldn't become bigger ones in the future. And I definitely went over time, so I'm really sorry about that. But that is our whole presentation, and we really appreciate it. Ta-da!